There is a highly calculated, deeply unsettling psychological phenomenon dominating the modern landscape of human connection that leaves the subconscious mind in a state of permanent, low-grade panic and emotional exhaustion. You experience a sudden, unexplained drift in a connection. Someone who once flooded your screen with attention suddenly retreats into complete silence, leaving you sitting at your computer workspace or staring at your phone trying to decode the void. Just as you finally begin to accept the silence, just as your central nervous system starts to calm down and step out of the obsessive loop, a completely low-effort notification flashes across your screen. It is a casual meme, a late-night text, or a vague question sent with absolutely no intention of following through. In modern clinical psychology, this behavior is known as breadcrumbing. It is the tactical deployment of sporadic emotional crumbs designed to keep a victim anchored on the sideline of someone's life. To the conscious ego, receiving this message feels like an immediate wave of relief or a sign that you are still remembered, but beneath the surface, it is an aggressive, automated defense maneuver. The sender does not want your presence. They simply want to confirm that they still hold total access to your emotional real estate, completely blinding you to reality, simply to feed their own fragile ego at your absolute expense. This profound communication breakdown is driven by a mechanism known in behavioral psychology as passive-aggressive proximity regulation. When an individual operates with a deep internal fear of genuine intimacy, their subconscious treats total emotional closeness and total abandonment as equal threats to their survival. To navigate this internal crisis, their mind invents a manipulative compromise. They utilize breadcrumbing to maintain a highly controlled, safe psychological distance. They do not want to let you go completely because losing your attention would trigger a severe narcissistic injury or a drop in their validation cache. But they refuse to step into true vulnerability because closeness triggers an immediate survival panic. Therefore, their subconscious executes an automated regulation script. They feed you just enough hope to keep you from walking away, and then instantly freeze their warmth the moment you try to step closer. They transform your empathy into a commodity to be harvested whenever their ego experiences a temporary drop in external validation, keeping you locked in a loop of permanent suspension simply to maintain their personal comfort. To understand why these low-effort breadcrumbs hold such an ironclad, addictive grip over your consciousness, we must examine the neurobiology of variable reward intervals and the dopamine pathway. When modern neuroscientists place individuals caught in mixed-signal relationships inside functional brain scanners, they witness an extraordinary neural event. If a partner is consistently warm, your brain produces a stable, predictable baseline of serotonin and dopamine. But the moment the attention becomes completely unpredictable, your nucleus accumbens enters a state of hypervigilant obsession. This intermittent reinforcement triggers a massive, explosive release of dopamine, the exact second that low-effort notification flashes on your screen. It is the identical biological mechanism that anchors a severe gambling addiction or a chemical dependency. Your prefrontal cortex is taken completely offline by stress hormones, and your biology pulls the plug on your logical reasoning. Your mind becomes entirely blind to the cruelty of their past silence, forcing your nervous system to loop endlessly around a single text message simply to secure the immediate chemical relief of validation. When this intense neurochemical anxiety takes hold during the silence, the victim's subconscious mind deploys an aggressive psychological shield known as predictive narrative fabulation. This is an automated defensive maneuver where the anxious brain actively uses its intellect to invent highly complex, comforting justifications for why the other person is refusing to offer consistent communication. The ego cannot tolerate the raw, painful reality of being deliberately kept on a sideline as an option. To protect your pride from the terrifying realization that you are accepting crumbs, your mind performs a catastrophic rewriting of reality. It begins pointing to external variables inside their workspace or life, It tells a story they are just incredibly stressed at work, they have past trauma that makes them avoidant, or they are secretly protective of their feelings. Notice how the mind weaponizes your own capacity for psychological insight to shield you from the reality of their neglect. This process happens entirely beneath your conscious awareness, leaving you completely blind to the fact that if they truly valued the connection, they would not force your nervous system to live in a state of chronic starvation. The primary weapon a breadcrumber uses to reinforce this emotional suspension is a process called validation ingestion. When a manipulator fires off a vague text after weeks of silence, their subconscious is not seeking a genuine conversation or scheduling a physical encounter. They are executing a low-risk audit of your compliance. The exact second you respond to their message, whether you reply with kindness, an immediate answer, or even a furious paragraph demanding accountability, their ego achieves its objective. Your response delivers an immediate data point to their predictive engine, confirming that they still possess total emotional authority over your life. This realization clears their internal anxiety, allowing them to instantly retreat back into cold silence without reading your reply. The clash between your expectation of a mutual dialogue and the reality of their sudden disappearance creates severe cognitive dissonance. Your brain uses rationalization to turn their cruel extraction of your energy into a minor misunderstanding, choosing to wait in hope for the next crumb tomorrow rather than enforcing a hard, independent boundary today. Alongside validation ingestion, the manipulative mind utilizes a secondary, highly passive filter known as pluralistic relationship benchmarking. Once a person has entered a lifestyle dominated by digital matching networks and hyper-connected social spaces, their subconscious transforms human connection into an infinite catalog of options. This filter alters their ethical baseline because it erases your unique individuality. They view you not as a complex human being with sacred boundaries, but as a digital asset sitting inside a bench cache to be activated whenever their main options go quiet. This selective attention filter ensures that their brain actively highlights the excitement of potential new options while completely deleting or ignoring the moral obligation of consistency toward you. Pluralistic benchmarking transforms their relational landscape into a blank space where accountability feels entirely unnecessary. It allows them to string multiple victims along simultaneously through low-effort breadcrumbs, entirely convinced that their behavior is modern, casual, and completely harmless, shielding their ego from the terrifying reality that their avoidance is actively breaking human hearts. These abstract biological filters manifest daily in devastating real-world loops, the most common of which is the trap of the micro-engagement mirror. In our modern digital landscape, does not need to invest heavy energy to keep you trapped. They use the ambient notifications of your computer workspace or phone to maintain a haunting presence. They will watch every single one of your social stories within minutes of uploading, leave a casual reaction on an old photo, or drop a brief comment while completely ignoring your direct questions in your private messages. This micro-engagement is a calculated strategy to exploit your brain's predictive processing engine. Your mind is an absolute pattern-seeking machine that demands consistency to close a cognitive loop. When it encounters these continuous tiny digital breadcrumbs mixed with absolute emotional distance, your system enters an immediate state of hyper-focused analysis. You spend hours discussing the hidden meaning of a social media view with your friends, entirely blind to the reality that the manipulator is using a single tap of their screen to anchor your entire life to their sideline. We see this exact same self-sabotage playing out through the destructive pattern of the false closure mirage. When you finally gather the strength to enforce a boundary, stop responding to the crumbs, and initiate an absolute blackout, the breadcrumber's predictive engine registers an immediate threat to their validation supply. To shatter your defense, they will suddenly escalate the quality of their crumbs, offering an illusion of the deep emotional closure or commitment you have been begging for. They will send a message saying, "I've been thinking a lot about us," or "I'm finally ready to talk about what happened." This entry point is calculated with absolute precision. The manipulator knows that your core identity is anchored in a desire for resolution and deep understanding. By dangling the promise of closure, they construct an intense ethical trap. Your brain panics at the thought of throwing away a potential breakthrough, lowers its defenses and opens the door, entirely convinced that this time is different. You sacrifice your hard-won boundary just to secure a false promise, completely blind to the reality that the moment your compliance is re-established, they will instantly withdraw the warmth and lock you back in the trap. When this collective breadcrumbing and mixed-signal behavior scales up across an entire culture, it produces a highly unique phenomenon of relational nihilism and collective loneliness. Humans are profoundly cooperative creatures, but when an entire generation or digital community treats low-effort communication as the acceptable baseline and views genuine vulnerability as an embarrassing social liability, independent integrity is treated as a crime. People stop evaluating human connection based on shared history, respect, and mutual protection, and begin evaluating it solely based on whether it can be managed with zero personal effort or accountability. This collective blindness turns the public square into an exhausting marketplace of short-term ego extraction. A society slides into a profound crisis of isolation because ordinary citizens choose to view their romantic partners as disposable commodities, violently ghosting or breadcrumbing anyone who asks for stable consistency, turning a population into a synchronized herd of anxious, unthinking echoes who will gladly trade true human intimacy simply to protect the fragile ego from the risk of being rejected. The true danger of accepting emotional breadcrumbs is that it constructs a perfectly closed, self-fulfilling cognitive loop that entirely blinds you to your own loss of personal sovereignty. The cycle begins the moment you respond to the low-effort text, allowing the manipulator back into your mental workspace after weeks of absolute coldness. This environment creates immediate subconscious pressure to secure their approval, forcing your brain to reduce activity in its logical and self-reflective networks. Because your internal boundaries are lowered by the chemical relief of the dopamine spike, you choose compliance, overextending your emotional energy to keep their fleeting attention. To clear the immediate wave of exhaustion, your mind instantly deploys narrative fabulation, rewriting the event to convince your conscious ego that their casual crumb is a sign of a unique, intense, or fated connection. This failure to stand for your own dignity is then used by your predictive processing engine as a new, acceptable baseline for the future. When the next wave of silence arrives, your mind looks at its past data and says, "We accepted the crumb before, so it is safe to wait again," permanently locking you in a loop of trauma dependency. Dismantling this matrix of emotional starvation requires a rare, aggressive practice known as radical erasure. You cannot simply wish your dopamine addictions away. Your brain's predictive processing engine demands hard physical data points of absolute unyielding defiance to override its automated survival networks. This reprogramming begins by learning an extraordinary truth uncovered in behavioral psychology. You cannot change a breadcrumber by offering them more patience, more explanation, or more availability. You can only break the spell by choosing to completely delete them from your reality. The next time a toxic presence triggers your anxiety by sending a low-effort text or viewing a story from the sidelines, do not look to their screen for closure. Recognize that your rising heart rate is your amygdala firing an early abandonment alarm. Force your physical body to execute an absolute blackout. Do not reply, do not argue, and do not explain your boundaries. Archive the chat, block the profile, and match their low-effort crumbs with an absolute wall of permanent indifference. By refusing to respond, you shock your predictive engine, providing an immediate data point that proves your survival is completely secure without their validation. Stepping out of the shadow of a breadcrumber and choosing your own emotional sovereignty is an act of supreme psychological heroism, because it forces you to face the raw neural pain of chemical withdrawal, sudden isolation, and absolute public visibility. Your brain will fight this process at every single turn, desperately screaming at you to check the screen, respond to the crumb, and accept the comfortable shared illusions of the loop simply to keep your ego safe from the agony of closing the door forever. But now that you know the anatomy of the trap, now that you understand how your subconscious mind uses proximity regulation, intermittent reinforcement, and predictive fabulation to turn you into an unthinking echo, the crumbs have lost their lock over your consciousness. You can choose to step out of the illusion and view your connection with absolute, unyielding clarity. This navigation of your subconscious architecture is a lifelong education, and your brain utilizes dozens of other invisible neural mechanisms every single day to dictate your choices and trap you on autopilot without your consent. If you are ready to shatter the rest of these hidden mental loops, discover how your mind fakes reality, and unlock the true mechanisms of your subconscious, click on the playlist appearing on your screen right now. We have built an entire archive of long-form psychological deep dives designed explicitly to help you look past the self-delusions of your ego. Click through, explore the library, and take absolute control of your psychology.